Hello, welcome to the Bigger Truth Show. I am Scott McMahon, and today I am doing things a little bit differently. We're not doing this live just because of scheduling, but I have with me Quang Nguyen, Representative Quang Nguyen. He's a state representative in Arizona, and we've spoken a few times over the last several months, and he actually represents Yavapai County, which is the county that I used to live in a long time ago when I lived in Arizona. And so yeah, I know the area well. But and I had read about him and been familiar with him. He's been in office now for some time. He's a survivor of lots of things, and I look forward to hearing his story. And also, we're going to be talking about what I believe is an existential threat to the Republican Party, to states where this issue is on the ballot, and it's on the ballot in a lot of red states, and that is ranked choice voting and jungle primaries, changing the election system so that every state becomes something like California. So, with no further ado, Representative Quang Nguyen, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you for taking the time out to hear me out. And I've been listening to a lot of your videos, and so I really yeah, I appreciate being up here with you.
Great. Well, thank you. Okay, so uh, let's start. I just because we have a national audience of people all over the country, and I think I have spoken with state legislators in several other states, and you all have a very similar story, which is um, how you're kind of being attacked from within your party. But before we get there, I think your story is just fascinating, and you were born in Vietnam, and I'd love to hear, um, your story about how you got here and how you got involved, why you decided to get in politics and with the Republican Party.
So I was born in 1962, just before the escalation of the Vietnam War, which is 1965, all the way through to the end of 1975. Growing up as a kid. Um, you wake up, there's a war going on, and you go to bed, there's a war going on, you go to school, there's a war going on. And so life was rather normal for me, um, until I actually lived through three invasions: the Tet Offensive, the Spring Offensive, and the final fall of Saigon. And so Tet Offensive, I was 6 years old, but amazingly, when people say, "Well, do you remember anything?" I'm telling you, when it's that drastic, uh, you tend to remember a lot of things, a lot of details. I knew exactly where I was at 6 years old, when a Huey flew by, launching rockets. You see those images, right? And so I moved on. Life was pretty normal. Somehow I got lucky and got on a C-130 6 days before the fall of Saigon, April 24th. And my dad took a brother and myself and dropped us off at the airfield and said, "Hey, you're gonna get on that C-130 with a bunch of people, and just to let you know, you may not see your mom and dad ever again." I was 12 years old. I was taken out of school. I had a pair of shorts on and a white shirt, and dad handed me a bag of clothes and said, "This is it. Do I get to say goodbye to mom or my other siblings?" No. At the time when that was happening, dad was already retired as a lieutenant colonel from the army. Um, he joined us, the ARVN, which is the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, in 1954, when the DMZ was opened up, where South and North can kind of go back and forth. And then he went south and he joined the military to fight the same people he fought with during the French War. Um, so in '73 he retired as a lieutenant colonel, and now '75 forward, he's got to take care of his family, including me and the rest of the other kids. And we got on the C-130, we flew. The next thing I know, I'm bouncing, from the Philippines to Guam, where you get vetted and then you get vaccinated, and then you go on to Travis Air Force Base, Camp Pendleton, and on to what is it, Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. That's where I was, and somehow my mom and dad and the rest of the other kids um, floated out to sea on a barge and was picked up by the USS Miller, which just happened to be out in the Pacific Ocean. And so they got on and they came to California as well. But yeah, so it's a long
They
road.
they just got on a barge floating out to sea,
Right.
just just not knowing what would happen to them at all, knowing that being out at sea was better than being on land.
Yeah. I think that God had a lot to do with it. I think we got out somehow. We got out, but you have to. Well, I'll tell you this: during the time that I flew out, I have two brothers that were fighting in the war still. One was a captain in the Vietnamese Airborne. The other one was a second lieutenant in the Army medic. He was an Army medic, so he's running around the rice field patching people up. The other one was still in combat until the very last day, and there wasn't anything to save at that point. So the question earlier you said was, how did you become a Republican? Well, once I figured out how to read in English, I started reading history. And history, by the way, history written about Vietnam back in the days is not the same as what you're reading today. And so thank God I grew up in the 70s learning how to read. And I figured out real quick, there's a thing called the 93rd US Congress. And these are the same people that had Ted Kennedy, Joe Biden, and all these Democrats, believe it or not, 50 years ago, and they're still in office today. I mean, obviously Ted Kennedy is no longer there, but these are the same people that says we're gonna ignore the Paris Peace Accords that was signed, and we're gonna defund the Vietnam campaign as well as the Cambodia campaign, and then Scott. I don't know how many people actually think about this. 2 million people slaughtered in Cambodia because of one congressional decision to not honor the Paris Peace Accords. When's the last time you saw a Democrat back in the day actually said, oh crap, we have blood on our hand. We did it. Our decision made that happen. But you still see these people running around, running for office, and be in the White House.
Right.
I mean, that's what's amazing about this nation is that you can be that stupid and still have people supporting you.
Right.
And I'm gonna be frank about it. I'm sorry, this interview is gonna be a terrible thing for you if you don't start doing some editing. But that's how I feel about it. And so that's the reason why I can never ever see myself being a Democrat, knowing what I know. And then the 94th Congress came around. Did they fix it? No, they just sort of went along. And so now that pissed me off a little bit more. But you know, that's the main reason why. And the Republican Party, 1854, is the party to design or came about because of slavery. We wanted to abolish this slavery, and people have forgotten about it.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, somebody told me this morning that there was, when the country was founded, there was the Federalist Party and then the Democrat Republican Party, and that there's a whole lot of people who believe that the Republican Party was founded by Thomas Jefferson, and it's it's really just completely false.
Right.
The Republican Party was founded in here. There's competing stories. Some in Michigan, we believe that it was founded under the oak tree in Jackson, Michigan. In Wisconsin, they believe that it was formed over there in Wisconsin. But it was about the same time. There were two meetings that both were kind of the nexus of the Republican Party.
Yeah, but if you look at it in either story you believe, it's about a coalition of people
Mhm.
and communities that came
Yeah.
together and said, we can't tolerate slavery,
Right. Yep.
right? And people have forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Um, and somehow we're the, I had a conversation with a bunch of seniors the other day in high school. I gave a presentation to three different high school classes, and I asked a very simple question. Do you think Republicans are racist? And you can see the kids are shy and they're kind of staring at you. And I said, well, if you actually believe so, why do you think I'm standing up here in a primarily white county? Why am I standing in front of you giving a presentation if you think Republicans are racist?
Who has overwhelmingly and decisively won all of his elections. And
Yes. So I can't. But I'm gonna die as a Republican. Um,
as long as the Republican Party continues to exist, which I
and
sincerely hope it
and
does.
support
Right. Right.
people. I don't want to say like me, because it's a little rather selfish and arrogant when I say, well, I hope they support people like me, because why? I love my district. I love the county I live in. I love the town I live in. I love the state of Arizona. And I got to tell you, I love the United States because I know what it's like living outside of the United States. Um, I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. So what is in your opinion, what is the Republican Party?
Very simple. I have very few items on my thing. I mean, you see the list, the long, big list of the Republican platform. The only thing I have is really pro Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment, pro life, school choice, because I like to send my kids to wherever I want it to go, and cut tax. Arizona went from 4.5% down to 2.5% flat tax. And it was even higher before that, right? And we cut flat tax to individual as well as corporations and companies and so on. So being extremely fair, and just get out of the way of the economy. Just get out of the way. Don't I'll give you an example. There were 110 bills assigned to me as chairman of judiciary, of House Judiciary. I heard only 38. Did I piss a lot of people off? Yes, I did. I pissed a bunch of people off, the Republicans and Democrats. But the reality is, I don't want to go into office and tie people down with more regulations, more laws. Let's even repeal some of the laws that we don't use anymore. And so that's my philosophy of being a Republican. Be responsible for the community that you live in, um, and make sure you build an economy to support. We have homeless people. We have people that it's nearly impossible to buy a house here in Prescott or Prescott Valley anymore because you just can't afford it. And my wife and I were lucky enough to have bought a home in 2004. Otherwise, we couldn't afford the home we live in now. There are a lot of problems, but to me, that's basically what the Republican Party is. Hey, don't ask for anything. Go to work. I know what it's like being a janitor. Be self-sufficient. You're gonna make a student loan, pay for it.
Right.
How simple is that, right?
Yeah.
That's
Right.
how I see life. And by the way, criminalize the heck out of people dealing fentanyl. Criminalize all these guys that are crossing the border. We got to take it seriously.
Right. I mean, you talked about blood on your hands, and the politicians that are enabling crime, violent crime. It's unconscionable. It is absolutely unconscionable.
Right.
Um, and most of them, not all, but most of them are on the left, and and so I think of, and we're kind of we've delved a little bit into the philosophy of what is a Republican and what is the Republican Party, and I think that there's most of my guests in the past have been intra-party members of the party, so people who work within a state party. You know, many there in Arizona and in Michigan and other states. But and so there, most people don't understand what the party actually is. I mean, so I talked about this on Monday in some length. So the Republican Party really is it is a network of connected organizations. There's multiple parties. So every county, every district, every legislative or congressional district, and every state has its own Republican Party. So in there are what 15 counties in
15
Arizona,
counties in the state of Arizona.
and how many legislative districts are there?
30.
Okay, so there's 30 LDs, 15 counties, and the state, and each one of those has its own Republican Party, and their bylaws all vary. Their rules or bylaws, statutes are consistent because it's state statute in Arizona, and statute actually governs party function and operation in Arizona, but not in other states. Um, and so and in every state they're different. You know, so they each are their own unique organization, but they all come together with the common purpose of raising up, training, and deciding on and getting elected people like yourself and into office. And so that is what the party is. The party is not the elected officials. The party is the people, these organizations and the people within them that get people like yourself into office. Is that an accurate assessment of
That's pretty accurate. And when you look at the union, the 50 states, and the republic, I mean, if you look at the state of Arizona, we're behaving just like the republic, the union of the 50 states.
Mm.
Each district will be democratically voting for your person, your favorite Republican, your favorite Democrat, and then we go to the general election and we elect that person, and we all go down to the Capitol to do the work for the individual district, which is the equivalence of one of the 50 states.
Mhm.
And so it's very similar. And so I am so happy to be a part of the process. But sometimes we tend to not be so unified, and I wish we could be a little bit more. Um, so you have a primary, you elect the person that, or the person is elected by the majority, and when we go to the general, we ought to be able to say, you know what, man, I really hate that guy Quang, but now he's in the general. I need to consider voting for him, but that doesn't always happen. Um, and so I don't know if that's the culture now, or has it always been that way? I don't believe so.
When were you first elected?
Yeah, I was first elected in 2020.
Okay.
But between 2020 and now, I still get the majority of the votes, but there are people actually voicing their displeasure with me, which is, I'm fine with that. I mean, we're in the business of being criticized when we do the wrong things, or even when we do the right thing that doesn't agree with an individual. But the reality of it is, Scott, people say, well, you are representing all 250,000, but there's certain percentage that never voted for you, never believe in your platform. They actually believe that you're evil if you say support the Second Amendment. And I just want to touch on that a little bit. And I said this on Twitter in my account. I defend the Second Amendment because I lived once without it. And it sent me 8,500 miles to the United States because I believe I didn't have that right to keep and bear arms. And so that other side is never gonna believe in what I said until, Scott, how do I get you to live my life? How can I explain my life to you to where you can actually understand why I think the way I do? It's nearly impossible. Because if I can say, you know what, I love chicken pot pie, you can go out and buy one and you say, yeah, Quang, you're right. But if I said, I was shot at or living, in a communist conflict, how do I explain that to you other than saying, it's not pretty? But I wish we could just be, hey, listen, the people spoke. We elected Quang and Selena Bliss. Um, Now we all need to support them,
Right.
um, to represent us with the platform, of the national as well as the state Republican Party, and then my personal platform as well.
Which is traditionally, I mean, that's the way that both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party has always operated. I mean, we naturally should say, okay, so after the primary, apply the Ronald Reagan rule, which is if you agree with me 80% of the time, you're my friend and ally. You're not my 20% enemy. And so, we come together behind the candidate that most represents and best represents our values and what will, you know, another aspect of what makes the Republican Party that you're underscoring here is we're the party of individualism, not collectivism. And that's one of the fundamental aspects of what defines the Republican Party. We're the party of individualism, not collectivism. And yet, so you're describing this pushback that you're getting, this collectivist pushback that you're getting based on your support of the Second Amendment, because the Democrat Party, as a collective, rejects the Second Amendment and believes that it's actually guns that are the cause of violence, not the people, and not
Right,
it.
right, right.
And
And the way I look at it is, if you ever have an opportunity to visit a penitentiary or jail or whatever, you'll find out that guns aren't behind bars. If guns are the bad guys, I mean, you would go there and see a whole bunch of guns behind bars, but they're not.
I mean, that's
They're,
cute.
they're,
But yeah, but
they're
it's
individuals that actually wake up in the morning and make a decision to go rob the bank or go to the grocery store and pick up a pencil that doesn't belong to you.
sure.
um, how do you deal with that, right? And so the gun is only the vehicle to make sure that you can rob the bank and intimidate people to put money in the bag for you, and you run out, and you have this gun. But that doesn't mean that my gun is being used the same way. And I wish people would look at it, in a more um, objective view of firearms and the Second Amendment.
Right. And it's interesting because, it's very easy to look into countries where guns are illegal, and the criminals either still get guns illegally or they use knives or something else to engage in mass murder. So if somebody wants to engage in mass murder, not having access to legal firearms isn't going to prevent them from doing so. They're still going to do it. And the only difference is that re- responsible law-abiding citizens won't be able to use a gun to defend themselves. But where I want to go with next with this is that we're describing this kind of collectivist mind virus, which is um, what the the whole belief that guns are the cause of gun violence. It really is a collectivist view, and the same thing is being directed towards you. Before we came on, you made a comment when before we started recording that I thought was just really interesting, and that I've heard from elected officials in other states as well, which is, I expected to be attacked by the other side. What I didn't expect was to be attacked by members of my own party. And so, I'd be really interested in what are some of the attacks that you have experienced from members of your own party, and um, because what I've been researching now for 10 months is an insurgency within the Republican Party that is led by Flynn and Patrick Byrne and Roger Stone and others. That is not it's anti-Republican. That it does not embrace Republican values, even though the people who are a part of it, they believe that they're Republicans, they believe that they're conservatives, they even believe that they're Christians, as they espouse complete and total hate. for what they call rhinos, and it's collectivist the same exact way, because they demand complete allegiance to not just their views, but themselves, to the leadership. You know, it's a collectivist allegiance that they demand to the leadership. Otherwise, you're a rhino, and you'll be targeted for removal.
Yeah, so you mentioned the term rhino. I mean, you realize that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan would be rhinos today. Think about it, right? And by the way, there's a reason why I love Richard Nixon, because he sort of bombed the hell out of the North Vietnamese when I was living in Vietnam. So he's always going to be my guy. You know, anybody who's willing to throw a commie out of a helicopter, he's my guy. So it's all good, but you can edit that part out if you like to, Scott. But
I will
Ronald
be
Reagan,
so just
yeah,
edit.
Ronald Reagan is interesting because he's got the 80-20 rule, which I totally believe in. So when you talk about rhino, um, do I like the term rhino? No, I just don't like to label my fellow Republicans, right? And the way I look at it is even even a rhino will vote with you on gun rights, on babies, on saving lives, um, low taxes. Um, there's so many things a rhino will vote with you, but if you get rid of this rhino and you get the Democrat, you have 100% the opposite way. And so, do I agree with, say, all of my Republicans, say, in the swing district? Probably not all the time, but I'm very forgiving when it comes to a Republican legislator. And some people see that as being wrong. You have to have this, you have to go through this purist test to prove that you're 99.9%. I can tell you there's an organization that gave me a 94.7, but still letting me know that I'm losing patriotism, right? So remember when you were in college and high school, you got a 94.7. That's a solid A,
Uh-huh.
right? But that's not how. I mean, I had a gentleman who runs an organization here in Yavapai County, and he actually said that, hey, look, if Quang votes right 100% of the time, but if he's wrong on one issue, we're gonna try to get him out. So it's not 80-20; it's 99.9999 or else.
Right.
And so I don't subscribe to that philosophy. I think that even the most, um, not, I don't want to use the word liberal, the most, uh, how do you call it, the moderate Republican, when we come together to vote on an important um, item on the platform, we would all agree. And so that's where I want to go with that. When we talk about, hey, protecting children from sexual predators, I believe we could all agree, and even some Democrats will agree with us when it comes to hurting children or, protecting the elderly. Do we want a camera inside a long-term care facility to protect our elderly population? I think that's a bipartisan thing. It's not a bad thing. And so, yeah, we got to pick and choose. And Scott, I will tell you, you got to give me about 15 hills to die on. I'll pick one or two
Mhm.
that is important to the Republican Party. For example, if we got a bill by Janae Shamp that says if you have a botched abortion and the child is surviving, you have to give basic care as a physician to keep that child alive. I mean, the governor vetoed it, right? I mean, Republicans, we did get together and we did agree on that bill. And so you look back and you said, okay, how many rhinos actually voted on that bill? Voted yes. Well, yeah, every one of us did. I didn't see a rhino voting yes or no. All I saw was 31 Republicans voted for it in the House. And I think we are stronger when we stick together. We are individual thinkers. I agree with you there. But on things important like that, we need to stick together. And just because somebody disagree with you, some peripheral issues, don't go out and call them a rhino,
Right.
because you need that vote the next day.
Right. Right.
That's where I'm at. So I
Yeah.
get along with just about everybody.
Well, and that's really important. I mean, when I vote on an elected official, especially if they are not in an executive position, but in a a legislative type position, they have to be able to get along with other people. If I select somebody who's more of a radical, if I'm represented by somebody who's more of a radical that drives people away, that says it's my way or the highway, they're not going to represent me very well because they're not really going to be able to get anything done. In order to get something done in the House or the Senate,
Right.
with the state or in DC, you've got to be able to form form a group of people, a coalition of sort, to get things done. Otherwise, you're useless. And I think that most voters tend to understand that. That's why most voters just are repelled by uh, people who are taking extreme stance on anything. Because we want somebody that's going to represent everyone, and so the one element too, it's that I find just it's hilarious to me as a believer in born again believer in Jesus Christ is how many people profess to be Christians. I mean, I say it's hilarious, but really it's tragic. But it's clear by their belief system, by their words, and by their actions that they believe that there's an additional thing that's required in order to be saved, and that is believing in election fraud. And not just believing that there's election fraud, but believing that it occurs the way that they say that it occurs. And and if you don't, then you're not saved, and they'll call you demonic and satanic and all kinds of just absolutely insane stuff. But it's just not, I think it takes more courage today to and even though I believe that there was election fraud in 2020, and I think there always has been election fraud, but it takes more courage today to say, "Oh, well, I don't think that the election was actually determined by fraud," meaning that the amount of fraud was determinative of the outcome. It takes more courage to say that today in the Republican.
Right, right. Well, since when do we not have election fraud?
Mhm.
And I brought this up during the speaking engagement with the high school kids the other day, and I said, the ultimate form of election fraud was the assassination of Abraham Lincoln
Mm.
or President Kennedy,
Yeah, or the
or in July
right,
with former President Trump.
right.
I mean, that's the ultimate form of election integrity, election fraud, right there. You don't want this individual. Um, and there was a comment made on Saturday during one of my presentations that it was so terrible that people actually walked off the line. And they say, Quang, you sound like you blame the voters. And yes, I am blaming the voters. And I'll tell you what, coming from where I'm coming from, you couldn't get my ass off that line if you tried to. I don't care if there's a broken printer or whatever it is. I'm going to be in that freaking line until I get to vote. And why? You remember those people that stuck their finger in a purple bottle of ink?
Mhm.
Some of them die walking home after they voted. And yet they showed up in big long lines to dip their finger in the purple ink. What is our excuses for walking off the line? If somebody said, hey, Quang, we're going to close the building, I'm going to throw a tantrum if that building is being closed and I can't vote. I'm not leaving the line because I travel 8,500 miles to be here to find out the definition of freedom. And you're going to tell me that I have to walk off the line because of some broken machine? Yeah, is it a convenient thing? All of a sudden, on the day of, you run out of ink, and you got, yeah, I believe all that. I mean, yeah, I'm sure enough people talked about it. It's got to be true, but it's no excuse for me to not vote. And before we got on, we were before the show. I said President Trump lost by less than 11,000 votes in Arizona. But if you consider 133,000 gun owners never registered a vote in the state of Arizona, or the 51% of Christians decided to stay home, can we overcome election fraud? Yes, we can. 133,000 gun owners in Arizona decided that, hey, maybe we'll have Quang, who is the president of Arizona State Rifle and Pistol Association. He'll stand on the floor and fight for us. So now we're just sitting on a freaking couch, waiting for the few to go out and defend your Second Amendment or your right to keep and bear arms. I think we're doing it to ourselves. And the gentleman said, well, you seem like you're blaming the voters. Yes, I am. The system is not perfect. As a matter of fact, before I got on this call, I got off the phone with my Yavapai County recorder, and we are planning to have meetings and talk about how we can fix things. I'm willing to do that. That's not a problem.
Which is, and that is, that's what we should be voting for, is somebody who's willing to go. I mean, that's beyond what your job description is as a state legislator. You're really doing everything you can to represent and support your constituents, even beyond the legislature, and that's admirable.
Well, Scott, if we're going to take the job, right?
Right.
We got to do it. Just because somebody said, hey, being a state legislator in the state of Arizona is a part-time job, I never believed that.
Mm.
How can it be a part-time?
Right. Right.
You either represent the people or you don't, but how can you part-timely represent people? It doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure. Yeah, it's like what you're describing there, as far as, so you got, in 2020 there were 131,000 gun owners that not just didn't vote, but they never even bothered to register to vote. And then you've got, whatever the number of Christians is, professing Christians, that didn't vote. And and many others. And even Trump's campaign was just nowhere near as effective and inclusive and
Uh-huh.
successful in 2020 as it is now. Just night and day. I mean, what the campaign that he was running now is just amazing. And it is. I think that this is probably the best presidential campaign that's ever been run. I mean, it's just the messaging, the the number of appearances, the quality of appearances, the everything about the people that are being reached all over the country, not just in the swing states. It's remarkable. It is what he has accomplished, just in terms of putting together a campaign that reaches people and Americans with the message of freedom and prosperity. It's extraordinary.
Right.
But
Yeah, I've been to 4 of the rallies, and I have to tell you, it's the motivation is incredible, right? It makes me feel like I'm about to win
yeah,
again.
right.
And I had a conversation with my wife yesterday, and I said, I really am worried. And she said, you worry about your race? And I said, no. I worry about every race but mine, because I know I have enough votes to overcome whatever the Democrats are throwing at me. I heard they have as much as $250,000, and I actually have $11,000 in the bank. Yeah, in my reelection campaign, $11,000. I can overcome that, and it's not with money, but it was with messaging, what I've done in the last 4 years. You can see my voting record in the last 4 years, and and what I'm doing right now. I mean, I don't even have a radio ad, by the way, since the primary. No TV ad, no mailers coming out, no text message. But I would do this. I raise money for my colleagues in the swing district, so I've been making phone calls for them as well. I think we have to help each other out. But yeah, the motivation is incredible, and I worry about all of the other races except for mine. I mean, I worry about Kerry Lake because we certainly don't want you know, continue to have two Democrats, U.S. senators representing the state of Arizona. It's really shameful for a red state to have that. And I believe Arizona is a red state, is not a purple state.
Yeah. And so let's talk about how that could end. I mean, there are two propositions. One of the real challenges I think this year for Arizona is that it's just such a long ballot. There's just so many different propositions. There's 13 different propositions in Arizona, but there's two constitutional amendments that are competing constitutional amendments, and I want to talk to you about those because I believe that this is really an existential threat to Arizona, and that's Prop 140 and 133.
Right.
So 140 allows jungle primaries, which is what they have in California, and ranked choice voting, which is in Alaska, what Lisa Murkowski created up there that allowed for Sarah Palin to lose in Alaska to
Right.
a Democrat. And it's lousy. And then 133 is
The opposite.
it sounds like it's good. I mean, it's the opposite, but the problem
It actually 133 is good because
it
it
is good.
says let's keep the system the way it is, the primaries, to keep it a way it is, keep it partisan.
Right.
Right?
Right.
No jungle primary. But it goes a little further by saying, hey, going forward, we're never gonna adopt jungle
Right.
primaries or ranked choice. That's what I like about 133. And 140 is the exact opposite. But I will tell you this, though, Scott, I'm very optimistic that 130 is going to pass and 140 is going to fail.
Oh,
And the
sure.
reason for that is you look at the ballots return. Republicans, never had a lead when it comes to early ballots, right? But here we are, the Trump campaign coming to Arizona and say, hey, vote early, vote immediately, take advantage of the system that was given to you, which is early voting. Go do that. And I think 140, and you and I had a phone conversation a few days ago, and I said 140 is an interesting thing. And I'm kind of a dangerous guy when you give me a cup of coffee and about 3 hours into the night, in the middle of the night with no one is around, right? I think about these things. And the way I look at the ranked choice is this. And maybe I'm on the dark side all the time. You wait until the first round to see who has the most votes in the first round. And that will be the target for everybody to go after if you're not a Republican or you're not a Democrat. Or if let's say Legislative District 1, Selena Bliss gets a top spot, and then everybody is going to look at it and say, we need to take her down. We need to manipulate the second round. And that's what I fear is the first round gives the people the target to go after. And then the second round will be manipulation of that to make sure we take Sarah Palin down.
So ranked choice voting is very complicated, and that's part of the design. Is it makes it so it's so complicated that most people don't really understand how it works. But in a nutshell, you have to vote first, second, and third choice instead of just voting for your candidate. You have to vote first, second, and third choice. And you told me the other day that if you don't do that, if you just vote for your candidate, that
It's
it cancels your whole ballot.
right, because let's say if you have 10 candidates, you have to rank them. And you didn't know one person and you decide to leave that one blank, that's not a legitimate ballot according to Prop 140. And I think it's confusing as heck. I mean, how can I rank people that I don't know?
Right, right. And
So
so
let's keep,
when you
yeah,
say targeting them, then what that targeting would be to form a collectivist bloc that would take maybe the first choice and tell everybody to vote for that person third, because
right,
that would downgrade them.
right,
And so if you have third place votes when you're coming up with the top two or the top one, that hurts them more than that creates like a negative
right,
score.
right.
So,
And I'm selfish. I don't want to give a voice to anybody who isn't a Republican.
right.
I don't want them to have a voice on my existence
Mhm.
as a candidate, right? And
Right.
so if you decided that you're gonna be registered, and by the way, this is really crazy. Democrats in Yavapai County were selected. You run for the state senate, and you two run against Quang and Selena Bliss. There's no primary on their side, and
That's right.
all of a sudden they're now saying,
That's right.
we have to be fair. You guys got selected. How fair is that?
Right. Right.
The Republicans had primaries, and so here we are. We're actually elected to represent our party, and that should be the way it is. I don't like to give platform to people who never had a platform before. They didn't have a voice. Because why? Because they're Democrats, Green Party, Independents, whatever it is that they do. I think Republicans should be defined by the Republicans. Same thing with the Democrats. Boy, I would love to drop a bill that says you must have a primary in your party. You can't just select 3 people and say, oh, you 3. They did that in 22. And they did that in 2020 when I ran for office. They were 3 Democrats that were just selected to run for office.
Right. Yeah. And so because they don't have a primary battle, they don't have to spend any financial or energy resources on the primary. And all of their money that they raise goes against the Republican.
Right.
And
in 2020, Scott, I had 10 people in the primary in 2020 for the Republican Party. Altogether, 10 people. And I guess I was kind of the only guy with a strange name that most people can't figure it out.
Well,
but I have
a feeling you outworked the field though too. So the result though, Michigan is an open primary state, and an open primary is different from a jungle primary. So open primary, you still have a Democrat primary and a Republican primary. In an open primary, there's no party registration or affiliation for the voter. So when you get there on election day for primary election, you can decide, regardless of whether or not you're Republican or Democrat, you can decide which primary you're going to vote in. That's what an open primary is. But that's not what is on the ballot in Arizona and in many other red states. And what's on the ballot there is a jungle primary. So it's a primary that's not a Republican or Democrat primary. It's everybody is running in the same primary together, and the outcome of that is very likely to be if one party games the system, sending just the right number of candidates, there's a very high likelihood, and also directing all of their people effectively to vote in a collectivist block with the right first, second, third choice combinations, then one party can have both of the candidates in the general election. So you'd end up having Democrat on Democrat in the general election in a red state of Arizona, and that would happen most of the time, is my belief.
Yep. So you can actually have 2 Democrats fighting for the same state Senate seat.
That's right. In the general election. So the choice then for Republican voters is, do I choose this Democrat or that Democrat?
Right.
This is how terrifying Prop 140 is. It is really bad. But so I want to talk about just a little bit of research that I and some other people have done on this. $10 million has been raised to promote Prop 140. $10 million in Arizona.
Wow, I did not know that number.
That's more money than the Arizona Republican Party has received from the RNC for Trump's campaign in Arizona. They're like 9.3 million. So that more money has been spent to support Prop 140 than Trump has put in thus far, anyways, or as of a few weeks ago, last time I looked, in Arizona. So this is unbelievable. This is a huge amount of money for the state for one proposition. Now, there's the other problem. I agree with you. 133 is a good proposition, and it needs to pass. But there is, and we talked about this the other day, and you actually had you spoke with the House General Counsel, the lead attorney for the State House of Representatives, about this, because the way that the law is written, when there's two competing constitutional amendments on the ballot, the one with the higher vote count wins if they're both over 50%, which is likely. The one that has the higher percentage is going to win. And so it could be an outcome could be that 140 passes, 133 also passes. However, 140 becomes the constitutional amendment because it has a slightly higher pass rate than 133. And there are a lot of Republican groups who I believe that are linked, like Josh Barnett is one of them, total anti-Republican, part of the whole Flynn cult. And he's his golden ticket that he's putting out there through his organization says vote no on every proposition. And a lot of Republicans are planning on doing that, voting no just on all the propositions. And but the Democrats, because of this $10 million, this all of that, that they're going to be united as a collectivist bloc to try to pass 140 and also against 133. So we need Republicans, even though it's good and encouraging that we have more Republicans coming out to vote. They're not getting the message. Only $5,000 has been spent against 140, but $10 million for.
I have a lot of people talk about being constitutionalists, and you mentioned, I mean, I don't know Josh personally at all, but I've been explaining this to people, the entire time when I go out to speak in Yavapai County. Well, why do you why are you voting yes on all these different propositions? And I have a simple explanation for it. Well, first of all, let's go to all the proposition. Clearly 139 and 140 should be no. I mean, solid no. 139 is unlimited abortion. And I thought about, just let me go to 139 real quickly. I thought I was just sitting around. I mean, I don't go to bed till 1 o'clock in the morning because I'm still drinking coffee, thinking, um, why do we have 139? And selfishly, I said, in 2023, when I became chairman of judiciary, the first thing I said to Speaker Ben Toma was, make sure, I get all the abortion bills assigned to me, and make sure I get all the Second Amendment bills going to me. And I think the 2023, I killed as many as 7 abortion bills and 16 anti-gun bills. And I did the same thing. I think there were less than 7 abortion bills and about 24 anti-gun bills that I literally, burning up my shredder, doing it. And so they can't get any abortion bills or abortion-friendly bills past the Judiciary Committee. And so that's why I think 139 came about. It was the both of let's get the majority of the people to vote on 139, which gives you full-on abortion, and you kind of not have to define who medical caregiver is. It's wide open. So I don't know if my optometrist is going to be able to do an abortion because he is a medical advisor and medical caregiver. It is horrible. But when you look at all these propositions, I always tell people, here's the simplest thing. And there was a gentleman in a crowd that heard me said that the day before. The day after we had another meeting, he actually said, hey, can we have Quang Nguyen get up there and tell us how to vote on the propositions? Very simple. Go to the original bills. For example, 314 is the border bill. And 314 originally started as a House Concurrent Resolution Bill 2060. Go to 2060. When you said vote no on everything, you actually gonna vote no on 314, which will clean up our border in 4 different points. And I'll go through it with you later. But look at the original and see how many Democrats are voting against that bill. How many Republicans? It's clearly party line. Now, you have to ask yourself, if all Democrats voted no for 314, are you now encouraging Republicans like us to vote with Democrats?
Right.
When you say no to all these propositions that are actually clearly supported by the Republican Party, there are 47 Republicans voting yes, both in the House and the Senate. Are you then running around and tell people, hey, let's vote against the 47 Republicans, and why don't we join in with the Democrats? And that's how I explain how these people should vote. And if you don't believe me, go to the original bill. Look at how they vote. And then ask yourself, look in the mirror and said, am I encouraging people to vote with Democrats? Or should I be saying, let's vote and support the Republican Party? And it goes back to that individual thinking again. Just because you have the ability to think individually, that doesn't mean you should think the wrong way.
Like a leftist, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just because you can, that doesn't mean you should. Think about it. Go back to the original bills. I've been telling people that.
Mhm. Yep. And but that's completely in line with what Shelby Bush and um, the MCRC and that whole faction within the party. That's what they've been doing all year. I mean, they've been censuring good incumbents and putting out press releases. Like they put out a press release just a month ago against Rachel Alexander saying that they weren't going to vote for her. As for county, not Rachel Alexander, the county attorney there um, in Maricopa County, um,
Rachel Mitchell?
Rachel Mitchell. Yes, Rachel Mitchell. So they're saying, we're not going to Rachel Mitchell. We're not going to vote for you. And this is from MCRC, the Maricopa County Republican Party, putting this out just a month before the election. It's unbelievable. And while she's running against a pretty far left Democrat, and I mean, this is not Republican behavior. It is very clearly an insurgency, and
Right.
they're doing the same thing. They're putting the same types of attacks, probably not quite as overt, but I don't know if they've tried to censure you, but I know that Zipperman and the crazies, and they are crazy. They're in Yavapai County. And Zipperman came here from California, trained with Yale Wishnick, who I believe is a lifelong communist, and who actually admits that he trained with Paul Litsky in the 70s. And so Zipperman got his training from him, and I've heard from a couple people that Steve Zipperman, and he was the county party chair, I believe, in Yavapai County. But he kind of
Zipperman?
run action.
Zipperman?
Was he the county party chair?
No. He's never been. He
Okay,
probably wishes that he could be.
right.
Uh,
But
but
he runs this whole coalition there in Yavapai County that is trying to, this anti-Republican coalition.
right, right. And you're talking about Maricopa County, and I'm so glad that I live in Yavapai County. Yeah, do we have a couple of people that are outside of the box, shooting arrows at us? Yeah,
Yeah.
and you mentioned one of them, Zipperman. But Yavapai County is a little bit more tolerable. Yeah, I was up for censure um, 3 times. All 3 times failed, but and it all went back to the Liz Harris thing. Why did I expel? And the way I look at it is, um, if you're doing the wrong thing, I mean, just because you're elected, you don't get to behave like a criminal. I'm not saying she's a criminal. I'm just saying that, listen, the majority of the Republicans agree with me. The few disagree with me, but that doesn't mean I'm wrong. If we're talking about individual, the ability to have individual thinking, then why am I being censured for voting my conscience?
Yeah.
I
Well, I
always
mean,
ask that question.
Harris very clearly violated the rules and everything that you're supposed to do within the state legislature. I mean, you can't get up there and accuse other legislators falsely of not just committing a crime but working for the cartels. And then she went and lied about it afterwards, and that's all like there. I mean, it's proven. She
And I tell people all the time, if
Wait,
you the 9-page report is available online.
right.
Anybody can download that 9-page report. And so I'm very clear in my mind, Scott, the way I think. There's black and white ink on a sheet of paper. There are things that are happening in closed caucus that I can't discuss. But the combination of everything, I just have to came to if I have to do it again today, tomorrow, until my death, that'll be the same decision I'm making. I'm not
And
changing it.
right, right.
And so people always have the right to censure me and get me out of office. And yeah, the more the merrier, right? When it comes to the primary. So if you want to move from some other distance place to come up here and primary me, I mean, everybody has the right to do it as long as you do it within the confine of what is the law, election law, and so on. People can do that. I mean, I hate to say this, and I joke around, and my wife's actually pretty mad at me all the time when I say it publicly. So I'll just say it. I'm not here to be reelected. Um, Being a legislator is such an honor and a privilege. Um, can you name a country where a war immigrant that should have died in a rice field 50 years ago came over here and be able to convince Scott to vote for me and have you believe in me and then have you look at my 4 years record and say, that guy's not all that bad. I mean, which country would do that, right? Except for the United States, of the great America. And so I won the lottery on April 24th of 1975. So I think the criticism from within or without, from the outside or within, they don't hurt me one bit. I've already won. You can't make a loser out of me. And so if I get unelected, Scott, you know what I'd be doing? I'd be fly fishing, riding my motorcycle, see my 2 kids, and spend more time with my wife. And she didn't like that fact that I was kind of like, you're taking it too lightly, but I'm not. I'm serious. If you think I don't belong in the party and I don't belong in a representative uh, office, then run against me and unelect me, or find somebody to run against me and get me unelected. I fully accept the result of November 5th.
Well, and yeah, there are rumors that this faction of the Republican Party is planning on doing that, and I can't wait to support you as that. But because I think what you're talking about here is the um this is really what we should all want in our elected officials is instead of being consumed with whether or not they're going to be able to continue their job and get your vote, their focus and their priority is very clearly on just doing the right thing. And I think that that's really I I think that every American, right and left, should want that from their elected officials, which is, I want to be represented by somebody who's going to do the right thing regardless, and not be controlled by the fear of losing votes, not be controlled by fear of man, but really what you're talking about is fear of God, not fear of man.
Oh,
And
absolutely. I think I remember in 2020, my daughter, who was in the Navy or still is in the Navy, I called her and I said, "Hey, Dad is a little bit nervous about the upcoming primary in 2020." And here's a 20-year old girl said to me, she said, "Dad, why don't we make it God's will and not our will?" I will always remember that line coming out of a young lady.
good
Make
job,
it
Dad.
God's will
That's amazing. That's really
and not your will. And I'm gonna continue to do that, Scott. It be God's will when I'm out of here. But while I'm in here, I'm gonna continue to not be told how to vote
yeah.
by outside organizations. There are a lot of, and some of those organizations is that I can't I can't do that because they didn't vote for me.
Mhm.
These organizations that are criticizing me or giving me a scorecard or endorse me or not endorse me at all. The way I look at it is they didn't elect me. These people, for 247,000 residents that live here, some of them elected me fairly. And so if I'm elected fairly, I don't know how else to behave but to vote for Yavapai County. And I'll tell you this: when I wake up in the morning, Scott, I think about how I can make life better for Yavapai County. I've never lived in Yuma. I never lived in, Cochise or Coconino or Maricopa County. I never lived there. I lived here. And if there's a pothole on Highway 69, I ought to be able to fix it. I should fix it. And so my job is, yeah, there are a lot of statewide things that you can criticize me on. That's great. But at the end of the day, I spent, what is it, nearly $30 million, and some people call it pork spending. Man, you should see Highway 69 now. If you ever come up this way, come up through Cottonwood,
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Right. That I
That's
look forward
what
to.
we should be doing.
That's one of my favorite drives, going up through Jerome and then over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Take a motorcycle through there. It's absolutely gorgeous.
I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's where I stand with all this stuff, and I really don't care what people think of me, or it actually affects the way I govern. Is that I just don't care what people think of me or how they criticize me. Is it a good policy, or is it a bad policy? I just hope that I don't do anything to embarrass leadership as a chairman. As a chairman, you're the extension of leadership. They trust you enough to give you the chairmanship. And I just hope that I don't embarrass them. That's my main concern, is to not embarrass the caucus. I spent 4 years making sure we protect the caucus. And I don't care what kind of Republicans you are. I'm always going to be there to defend you. But sometimes the favor is not returned. But that's okay. Everybody's got to do your thing.
Yep. Well, we've covered a lot of really great ground. I think this has been a fun conversation, and I'm so grateful that you were willing to do this. What do you have any parting thoughts? Is there anything that we've left out that you wanna share?
No, I think coming back with majority is a healthy thought, healthy goal, and I meant for both the House and the Senate, and I think we need to support every single Republican and not go into social media and start bashing Republicans. It's like I don't like my first cousin. He thinks differently, so let me go on to social media and bash my cousin daily. We don't do that to our cousins. We shouldn't do that to our colleagues with the same letter behind his or her name. And I think that when you start doing that, we're just giving ammo to the left, and they don't have to spend much money. That's how I see it. But that's it. But thank you for having me, though. It's such a pleasure
How
talking
can
to
people do you social media, or what's the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, they can reach me. First of all, my cell phone is listed at the Secretary of State office. So anybody who wanted to call me, they can get up there. But they can reach me out at Quang, Qung, 4 Arizona.com.
Great.
And they can go there and read about my background or about the policy that I got signed. And if you want to make a donation, that's great too. But whatever it is that you need to do, I'm here.
Great. Thank you so much, Quang. You're a statesman, and I appreciate you. I know your constituents appreciate you, and at least the majority of them do. and I think outside of election season, I'm sure many more of them do.
Right. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I always ask people, and I said, you know why God created couches? Like the couch. Because my wife and I don't always agree.
Right. So it's a place to come together.
Yeah, we got to get together and get this done.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. And that's that is it. An illustration of that, even there in Arizona, is I have been before especially before the primary, I was very vocal against Kari Lake, but I definitely recommend that every Arizonan vote for Kari Lake because she is she will support Trump's. She did
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the most important thing from our
We
U.S.
need her so badly in the state of Arizona.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also a vote for a national Senate majority. So it's not just a vote for Kari Lake.
Right.
We here in Michigan and all over the country, we all need Kari Lake, and
Yep.
same
Yep.
thing with my.
Yavapai County,
Yep.
you got to have Kari Lake, and you got to have Eli Crane,
Yeah.
and you have to have President Trump.
Mhm.
I mean, Eli Crane is our CD2, Congressional District 2. He's doing a great job, and we need to keep all of them. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Quang. This was really a pleasure. So until next time, and I'll be praying for you and for your success and for Arizona's success. And remember, vote yes on 133 and no on 140, and if you're in Arizona. So great. Well,
Thank you.
thank you, Quang. Take care. We'll be in
You
touch.
too. All
All
right.
right.
See ya. Bye.